Look at the animals, all of them. Have you ever seen a male animal and a female one approach each other for a sterile embrace and lascivious dealings? No. From near or far, they fly, crawl, jump, or run. They go, when it is time, to the fecundation rite. Neither do they evade, stopping at the pleasure, but they go further, to the serious and holy consequences of the offspring. The only reason that should cause a man, a demigod by his origin of grace, which I have made complete, to accept the animality of the act, necessary since you descended by one degree towards animals. You do not act as plants and animals do. You had as your teacher Satan. You wanted him as your teacher, and you still want him. And the works you do are what one would expect of the teacher you wanted. Have you been faithful to God? Had you been faithful to God, you would have had the joy of children, in a holy way, without pain, without exhausting yourselves in obscene and shameful intercourses, which even beasts are unacquainted with, although beasts are without a reasoning and spiritual soul. To man and woman corrupted by Satan, God decided to oppose the man born of a woman, whom God had super sublimed to such an extent that she generated without knowing man, a flower that generates a flower, without the need of seed, by a unique kiss of the Son on the inviolated chalice of the lily Mary. The revenge of God. Hiss, O Satan, your hatred while she comes into the world. This child has beaten you. Before you were the rebel, the twister, the corrupter. You were already beaten, and she was your conqueror. 1,000 assembled armies are of no avail against your power. The arms of men fall before your scales, O perennial one, and there is no wind capable of dispersing the stench of your breath. And yet the heel of this child, which is so rosy as to look like the inside of a rosy camellia, and is so smooth and soft that like silk seems coarse in comparison, and is so small that it could enter the chalice of a tulip, and make itself a tiny shoe with that vegetable satin, that heel is crushing your head without any fear and relegates you to your den. And her cry causes you to flee away, although you are not afraid of armies, and her breath purifies the world of your foul smell. You are defeated. Her name, her look, her purity are a lance, a thunderbolt that pierces you and demolishes you and imprisons you in your den in hell, O cursed one, who deprived God of the joy of being the Father of all men created. In vain you have corrupted them, who had been created innocent, leading them to knowledge and conception by means of the sensuousness of lust, depriving God in his beloved creatures of the being, the benefactor of the children according to rules which, had they been respected, would have kept a balance on earth between sexes and races, a balance capable of averting wars between peoples and calamities between families. By obeying, they would have also known love. Nay, only by obeying they would have known love and possessed it, a complete and peaceful possession of this gift from God, who from the supernatural descends to the inferior, so that also the flesh may rejoice devoutly, since it is united to the Spirit, and created by him who created the Spirit. Now, men, what is your love? What are your loves? Either lewdness disguised as love, or an incurable fear of losing the love of your partner through her or other people's lewdness. You are never sure of possessing the heart of your husband or wife, since lust entered the world, and you tremble and cry and become overwrought with jealousy. Sometimes you kill to avenge a betrayal, sometimes you despair, and sometimes you lack will or even become insane. This is what you have done, Satan, to the children of God. Those whom you have corrupted would have known the joy of having children without suffering any pain, and would have experienced the joy of being born without fear of dying. But now you are beaten in a woman and by a woman. From now on, whoever loves her will become once again God's own, overcoming your temptations to be able to look at her immaculate purity. From now on, mothers, though not able to conceive without pain, will find comfort in her. From now on, she will be the guide of married women and the mother of dying people, so that it will be sweet to die resting on that breast which is a shield against you, you cursed one, and against the wrath of God. Mary, little voice, you have seen the birth of the Virgin Son, and the assumption of the Virgin to heaven. You have therefore seen that the faultless ones are unaware of the pain in giving birth, as well as the pain in dying. But if the most innocent Mother of God was granted the perfection of celestial gifts, all those who in the first parents had remained innocent and sons of God would have generated without throes, as it was fair, having conceived without lust, and they would have died without anxiety. The sublime victory of God over Satan's revenge was to raise the perfection of the beloved creature to a super-perfection that should annul, at least in one person, all recollection of humanity, liable to Satan's poison, so that the Son should be generated not by a man's chaste embrace, but by a divine embrace that causes the Spirit to change color in the ecstasy of the fire. The Virgin's virginity. Come, contemplate this deep virginity that gives ecstatic dizziness in its contemplation. What is the poor, enforced virginity of a woman that no man married? Less than nothing. What is the virginity of a woman who wanted to be a virgin, to belong to God, but is so in her body and not in her spirit, where she allows alien thoughts to enter and entertains allurements of human thoughts? It is a sham virginity, but still very little. What is the virginity of a cloistered nun who lives only for God? Very much, but it is never the perfect virginity when compared with my mother's. There has always been an association, also in the Most Holy One, the original association between spirit and fault, the one that only baptism dissolves. It dissolves it, but as in the case of a woman separated from her husband by his death, it does not render virginity complete, such as it was in the first parents, before sin. A scar remains and hurts, causing one to remember it, and it is always ready to become a sore, like certain diseases that periodically are made worse by their virus. In the Virgin, there is no sign of this dissolved association with the fault. Her soul appears beautiful and intact as when the Father conceived her, gathering all graces in her. She is the Virgin. She is the only one. She is the perfect one, the complete one, conceived as such, generated as such, remained such, crowned such, eternally such. She is the Virgin. She is the acme of intangibility, of purity, of grace that is lost in the abyss from which it emerged. In God, most perfect intangibility, purity, grace. That is the revenge of God, trine and one. Against creatures desecrated, he raises this star to perfection. Against pernicious curiosity, he raises this coy virgin, contented only with loving God. Against the science of evil, this sublime, innocent virgin. In her, there is not only no knowledge of dejected love, there is not only no non-acquaintance with the love that God had given to married people, much more. In her, there is the absence of incentives, the inheritance of sin. In her, there is only the icy and white-hot wisdom of divine love, a fire that strengthens the flesh with ice, so that it may be a transparent mirror at the altar where God married a virgin and does not lower himself because his perfection embraces her perfection, which, as it becomes a bride, is only inferior to his by one point, subject to him as a woman, but without fault as he is.